thanks for tuning into the UFO show on 1160 WVNJ. I am Kate Valentine, and today I'm very happy to announce that Lloyd Pye is back with us. He will be discussing his 3 new videos on the Starchild Skull. Welcome back to the show, Lloyd. Thank you for stopping by.
Thank you so much, Kate, for having me. It's a real pleasure to be back.
It is, but some of our listeners may still not be familiar with the Starchild Skull, and so it's probably a good idea to give them a little bit of a background on it.
All right, very quickly, it's a real, true bone skull, no question about that has human-like characteristics, but is distinctly not human. It was found in about 1930 in a mine tunnel in Mexico, near the Copper Canyon area. And it was the girl at the time who discovered it. She found 2 skeletons in the mine tunnel. She recovered the skulls, kept them as souvenirs her whole life. In the early 90s, they passed to another couple, and from there, those 2 skulls passed. She just kept, like I said, as souvenirs and passed them to her friends when she was dying. They passed them to somebody else, and that couple, Ray and Melanie Young, in El Paso, Melanie had been a neonatal nurse. And everybody up until then had just assumed that the strange-looking skull was some kind of human deformity. But Melanie had been a neonatal nurse, as I said, and knew right away that wasn't true. So she then began to look into what was it, and out of that came the idea that it might have been a skull that would fit inside the head of a gray alien. So they brought me in, and this is in 1999. To take a look and see what I thought, and I thought it was highly unusual. I initially thought that it had to be some kind of deformity as well, but I said, it's so unusual, I'm certainly interested to find out what it is, and the more I began to look into it from a physical standpoint, the more I began to realize no expert could explain what it was physically, and then we turned our attention to genetics, and we've had to wait almost 13, I'm in my 13th year now, and we had to wait until 2010 really to start getting the kind of information about its genetics that we could use, because as it turns out, its genetics is completely different, or at least radically different from human genetics.
Yeah, you certainly have done a lot of research on it, and I think the major detraction or the theories that would argue against that would have been, as you said, genetic defects, some of the social defects like cradle boarding, the progeria problems, hydrocephalus, and medical problems. And you've gone through all those on your website, starchildskull.com, and you sort of...
StarchildProject.com.
Starchild Project, yes, you're right.
Yeah, StarchildProject.com, exactly. Oh. We have the 3 new videos up there, Kate, as you said in your intro. And those 3 videos are designed basically to do one thing, to allow people to put this information out there to their friends and associates and others with some sense of they're not going to be, they can't be just ridiculed, just say, oh, this is stupid, this can't be possible, the way it's very easy to do. And particularly in the 3rd one, the most recent one we put up, we have defended ourselves against all the lies and garbage that are on the internet from the mainstream, trolls and hacks and critics and skeptics, those who defend the mainstream position of science, whatever it is. I mean, it doesn't matter. We're not unique. I don't think we're being singled out for special abuse. We fall into that category of challenging a mainstream paradigm in a very serious way, and so that brings out the defenders in droves, particularly on Wikipedia. Now, Wikipedia is the number 1 lead dog in all of this effort to discredit anything in the world of alternative knowledge, and the Starchild is very, very high on that list. I have been told by people that know about this that the Starchild gets changed almost daily between people who are trying to put the truth up and that handful of editors on Wikipedia who make it their job to make sure that the truth does not go up. And someone told me that they tracked the record, and that the Starchild page has been changed more back and forth than the George W. Bush page back and forth, which just puts us in pretty good company in terms of controversy.
I would say.
That's it. And people are always saying, "Well, I tried to put something, X amount of information on it that's the truth, and it stayed there only an hour or two, and then somehow somebody changed it back." Well, that is the editors who are in charge of the site, and they have notifications on their computers whenever anybody from our side makes a change in a positive direction. And because they control it, they're the Wikipedia editors, they are able to change it back to the untruth or the lie or the distortion or whatever it is. And so it's just this ongoing war. And we had no way to counter that. So now that we've put this new video up, the Starchild Skull Snarks the Critics, people are able to see what the truth is of the things you mentioned. The main things that that the mainstream mentions, which is cradleboarding, hydrocephaly, progeria, and just in general, genetic defects in general, and we cover all that fairly well.
Because aside from the DNA and the genetics, you also point out some other differences as well. For example, the thickness of the skull and the sort of the physical makeup of the skull bones are very different than human.
That's exactly right, Kate. What we do, there are 3 videos. The one that we've been talking about is the defense of the garbage on the internet. But the other 2, one of them deals with just the straight out physical differences between the Starchild skull and a normal human skull, which are vast. Those differences are vast, and we go over some of the major ones that are most impressive. One of which is the bones, and then the other video talks about the differences in the DNA between a normal human, and the Starchild's DNA, which is also just vastly different. So between the DNA differences and the physical differences, it's extremely hard when you look at those 2 videos, none of which are long. They're all around 10 minutes. You see that, this really has to be something that's not human because of all the incredibly different physical things, like the bone, which is truly one of the most unusual. The Starchild's bone is much thinner, less than half to less than half as thick as normal human bone. It's much lighter. To hold it in your hands, it's like holding a dried gourd. It's really different. And yet when you try to cut it, it's 2 or 3 times harder. It's very hard. Its biochemistry is the biochemistry of tooth enamel. All the bone, all of it, is the biochemistry of our tooth enamel, which is the hardest part of our bodies. So in every way, in every significant way that you can think of or mention, the Starchild is different, both at a physical level and certainly at a DNA level. So how you can call that a human or a human deformity or some kind of new species, as people try to do, it's just ridiculous. This is an alien. We are talking about an alien. We are looking at an alien skull. We are dealing with alien DNA. I'm sure that's what the final result is going to be when we finally have the funding that we need, the investment that we need to recover the whole genome. And when we can do that, we will be able to create an event that will be equal to the most important events in human history, which is what we talk about in the videos about the DNA and the physical aspects of it. Events like this don't get much bigger, where we will be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that at least once there was an alien on the Earth and that humans are not alone, and it just changes our whole perception of ourselves.
Well, I think to me your most telling argument was in the mitochondrial DNA. And, as we're all aware of, too, I mean, that there's historical mitochondrial Eve. In other words, that's just passed down through the mother, and there's very few differences in almost any human. And yet, with the Starchild DNA, the mitochondrial DNA, there was a huge difference.
Right. We have 4 fragments of the Starchild's mitochondrial DNA. That is it's almost 10%. It's 9.5%. So that's more than enough to be statistically significant if you mathematically extrapolate what you have. And in those 9.5%, those 4 fragments, we already have 93 variations in the DNA. In all humans, the maximum that we have in all 16,000 plus base pairs, the maximum we have are 120. The maximum Neanderthals have is 200, around 200. The new pre-human Denisova has 385, and that's what made it a new pre-human, because it had a different number of mitochondrial differences. And so the Starchild comes in, when you extrapolate it out, between 800 and 1,000. Between 800 and 1,000, when the most we have is 120, the maximum. You and I and everybody listening here, we probably have in the range of 50, 60, 70, 80, something like that. The most we can have is around 120. We average in the much lower number. And there's the Starchild sitting between 800 and 1,000. It's just mind-blowing. It's overwhelming. It's staggering. It is so clearly not human and beyond human. It's closer to chimp. It's literally closer to chimp than it is to human in terms of its mitochondrial differences. It is a very, very different creature than a human. The Starchild is not in the ballpark of human when it comes to its mitochondrial DNA.
Well, when the people who are doing this research come up with these results, what do they have to say to you?
That they've never seen anything like it. I mean, when the geneticists started pulling, that we work with, started pulling these things out, his first reaction was, okay, I've made some kind of a mistake here. Okay. So he'd go back and do it again till, no, there's no mistake. This is just what it is. And now he's much more confident that he knows what it is now. Anybody that really looks into it, the only people that are out there criticizing it are those people that have never seen it, never held it, never taken any time to do anything with it at all, except just to go on their rote training that such things are impossible. And it's not even training, really. It's brainwashing. I mean, kids come out of academic situations, environments, believing certain things, one of which is that you cannot believe in UFOs or aliens, period. You can't defend that in any way. You have to take a position against it because we, the poobahs, say it's impossible, and so you have to say and believe the same thing. So by the time they get out of those PhD programs, that's where they are. Okay. But for those who have dared, for whatever, to step over the line and actually dealt with it, and there are a lot of them that have. I mean, a lot of them that have, probably worth around 50, that they all say the same thing. Well, I don't know what it is, but it's very, very, very unusual like that. Even then, they're kind of scared to say, yeah, this thing looks alien to me.
Well, at least
some do.
At least you weren't afraid to say that. Okay, Valentine.
Well, I didn't. I don't have an academic credential that I have to defend like they do.
Oh.
So yeah, it's a very dicey game. Look, they police their ranks very, very thoroughly, and anybody within the mainstream that steps out of line and makes a claim that is unacceptable to the majority, they'll get rid of them. They'll throw them out of the profession. They'll have to go find work somewhere else doing something else. It's intolerable.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break. It's Kate Valentine. We're on 1160 WVNJ, speaking to Lloyd Pye about the Starchild Skull. You can get a lot more information on this on Lloyd's website, the starchildproject.com. Also, you can go to Lloyd's website as well. That's lloydpye.com for a lot of other, much more interesting information as well. Or you can address your questions to Lloyd right now on our website, atlanticcoastufos.com. And we're just going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Hi, welcome back to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Our guest today, Mr. Lloyd Pye, is discussing his 3 new videos on the Starchild Skull. You can find those on his website, starchildproject.com. If you have questions for Lloyd right now, you can post them on our website, atlanticcoastufos.com. Lloyd, I think the first question that would come to mind is, assuming that this skull is obviously not human, what makes you think that it's extraterrestrial, or perhaps it's just a strange species from this planet?
Well, what makes me think that is because so much of the DNA so far is looking like it's not actually found here on Earth.
Okay.
And we're talking about a good chunk of it from the very first testing that was done. Dozens of fragments were pulled out of its the non-working part of its nuclear genome, the so-called junk area, the junk DNA. I know everybody's heard that term. Dozens of fragments were pulled out of that and run through the massive computer database at the National Institutes of Health, where anybody that's getting money from the government to run these tests, which is where you pretty much have to go get it because they're just so expensive. This new next generation technology is just extremely expensive to operate, which is why we need the money that we need, because we have to fund it at the level that is required. And the NIH database, when you get money from the government, you owe them a copy of whatever you recover. So they have in there now 120 to 150 different species types, millions literally of coherent strings of base pairs in there. So when you send something new to them and you want a comparison to see, well, what is this like? What is it, how does it shape up according to everything else? Some of the Starchilds will come back with things that are found in that database, including human. There will be stretches of Starchild base pair strings that match up with humans, but also with other animals as well, which is not unusual because all life on Earth is made up of the same general combinations of those base pairs. Chimps we have 97% the same of our genome with chimps. We share with chimps. 95 we share with gorillas. 70% we share with rats. 65 we share with mice. Fruit flies, I think, are 60%. It's all, everybody is some swapping and changing, so it's not unusual that the NIH database is going to send back on the Starchild some matches with living things on Earth. What is unusual is that a goodly chunk, almost half of it that was sent in, came back no similarity found, meaning that there were large chunks of the Starchild's DNA in those fragments, and we're talking fragments in the range of 300, 400, 500, 800, 1,000 base pairs long, didn't have any match. So that tells you right there you're dealing with something that when you recover the whole genome, something in the range of 50% to maybe as little as 10% is going to be never seen before on Earth. So that's pretty hard to argue that that's just some kind of other species because, it just isn't going to fly.
Well, the other interesting thing about that, the implication is that assuming this is an alien skull, that life is elsewhere is also based on DNA.
Well, I think that's going to prove to be the truth, Kate. I have always believed that once I learned enough about the life code to understand how incredibly complex it is, that it has to be ubiquitous. I mean, at least in our galaxy. I don't know necessarily the universe, but I think in our galaxy this is it, and probably everywhere, because the system itself is just so incredibly complex, and yet it's also so incredibly simple at its base core, the four base pairs. The four nucleotides that make up the base pairs. It's just like computers. You know how you have zeros and ones, and all the incredible complexity of computers really comes down to 0 and 1. Well, same kind of thing with the base pairs. The two of the nucleotides go together to make one base pair. Two of the other nucleotides go together to make another base pair, and then you get swapping, changing. The complexity emerges and begins to extrapolate from there. But to have a system that is so complex and covers so many possibilities, at bottom it has to be very, very, very simple, or it just can't function. So I think just like with computers, the life code is the same everywhere because it's just too complicated to have developed more than one place. And frankly, it's too complicated to have developed anywhere. It's just too complicated. I don't know how it got there. That gets into the religious issue of first cause, what caused, if somebody created us, who created them, who created them, who created them, first cause, no idea. And I don't think we're going to know that in not just our lifetime, but many lifetimes into the future. Somebody's going to have to come from the first cause camp. They're somehow going to have to let us know the truth, and I don't know if that's going to happen. But it doesn't matter. What matters is, it looks to me, and I believe it's going to prove out, that life is ubiquitous everywhere, and that the barroom scene in Star Wars is probably going to be pretty accurate, that while you'll have a lot of different types of alien beings out there sitting around the galactic round table, they will all share a common genetic code.
Well, it certainly has worked on this planet when you think of the wide variety of life here, not only at this time, but also in past epochs, that dinosaurs, and going back all the way back to the initial algae on the rock. I mean, that DNA has been working very well.
It has, and if you look at those events in the past, those epochs, those different eras that you're talking about, they end with catastrophes that wipe out anywhere from 50% to 90% of all the life forms on the planet. There have been millions and millions and millions of species that were here and are no longer here because they were wiped out by some catastrophe. And when that happens, very shortly thereafter, all those niches seem to be filled with new creatures that are functional in the new environment, whatever the new environment is, after the catastrophe. Some of the creatures that are here can survive in that new environment, but most of them can't. So those niches are filled in some way in a very quick hurry. Now, science is aware of this, and so they came up with a variation of Darwinism to try to explain it, of gradual development, and it's called punctuated equilibrium, which says basically the truth, which is that we have to accept that evolution goes slowly, but when there are these strange circumstances that occur after catastrophe, somehow it knows how to turn itself into something entirely different. It refills all the niches very quickly, and then it goes back to being standard evolution that we know today. Well, I mean, it's just a joke. It's just a Band-Aid on a problem that's really a very ugly problem for them, which is the fact that these things do show up very quickly. And really, from the first big burst of complex life, the Cambrian explosion, it just appears. Everything just appears. Well, that really, really moves you toward trying to explain that through terraformers. That's what I do with my ebook, Intervention Theory Essentials, for anyone who's interested in this. Intervention Theory Essentials goes over all of the massive amount of evidence that there is, a lot of the evidence that there is for terraformers from the beginning of the planet. I mean, from the beginning of the planet, it looks like everything we need to be a planet that will support complex life is brought here when it's needed, in the way that it's needed, and allowed to function in the way that it has to in order to turn the planet from a seething mass of magma, really basically, into what we live on today. Everything seems to be brought here. And I know, it's a shocking kind of concept, but really when you look at the facts, that's where they lead.
Well, I like that better than punctuated equilibrium, and that is, again, on your ebook for intervention theory, right? And that's also available on your website, lloydpye.com. Well, we're going to take a real quick break. Kate Valentine here on 1160 WVNJ. Of course, we're speaking with Lloyd Pye. Today, he's discussing his 3 new Starchild Skull videos. You can address your questions to Lloyd now by posting them on our website, AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. After the show, you can get so much more information on Lloyd's website, Lloyd Pye, LloydPye.com, or go directly to StarchildProject.com. We'll be right back after a short break. welcome back to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Our guest today, Mr. Lloyd Pye, is talking about his 3 new videos on the Starchild Skull. You can get further information on going to his website, starchildproject.com. You know, Lloyd, we had a comment that came in on another show over the week, and I thought it might be interesting to you since you are interested in intervention theory. Freeman had written in and said, "Are we an example of true, in quotes, true life? We still don't know how the first cell came into being. A complex machine designed to self-replicate, running a program stored in DNA. We assume that life on Earth is natural, but is it? Or do we represent state-of-the-art nanotechnology?" Sort of an interesting question.
It is, and I would agree that there's quite a possibility that all of it is created from the very basic first cells. Because when you really break it down to the first cell level, what comes first, RNA or DNA? You can't have one without the other. They have to both be in place, working, functioning at the same time. One's useless without the other. How would one develop and just sit there if it's of no use, waiting for the other one to develop and somehow then work, synchronously? It really doesn't make sense when you break it down to it. And I think science, all of science knows this. All of science that works on these things understands this. But they can't talk about it openly because they have no answer for what's going on. The truth of it is, science has to pretend, and always has had to pretend from day one of their reality and their existence. We are the scientists. We know what's going on. They have to pretend they know what's going on. That's their job. In our culture, in our society, in our world, science is supposed to have the answers, when in fact, they don't know much about anything. They are no better off, I assure everyone listening, they are no better off right now today in their level of understanding the true reality that we live in and is all around us on Earth and beyond. They have no better grasp of that than did the people 500 years ago who believed that either the Earth was the center of everything and that it was flat, and that was it.
Well,
we're at that level of ignorance still today relative to where we need to be, what the truth is about how we came to be here, how the Earth came to be, what's out and about around us, what's the galactic round table is like. All of those things that our scientists just totally reject and claim aren't there only because they can't explain it. Hominoids, Bigfoot, all of that, all these things that they just reject as outright as not possible, not real, forget about it. It's not because they actually truly believe that. You talk to them in private, yeah, we know, but we can't, we're not allowed to say these things. But I can't, because again, I don't have any reputation to maintain in that sense, and I don't have a job to maintain at a university or at a laboratory or something like that.
Well,
so I can pretty much tell it the way it is, and that is the way it is. Massive, profound, institutionalized ignorance, willful, deliberate ignorance of the facts, simply because it goes against their job description, which is to know answers, to have answers, to be the leading edge of our quest for knowledge, when in fact they all hang back at the very edges and they let people like me, and I'm not the only one, but they let people like me go out with the machete in hand and cut through the bushes at the cutting edge. That's what people like me do, because we can't. They can't. They have to hang back and lock arms. You see a row of people and they lock arms to hold together and then they move forward as a unit. That's kind of how science is. Getting out, moving out away from the group, unlinking your arms and moving ahead of the group, not allowed. Cannot do that. And those who try it always get hammered. That's how the science maintains discipline within the ranks. Anybody steps out of line, they're removed from the process. And that is a fact, and that is the way it is.
And I'll tell you, along those lines, Dave wrote in, said, regarding the Starchild, I think science can only tell us what it is not what it is. But speaking about what it is, you made some very interesting conjectures because of the physical differences in the Starchild skull, which let's assume for the time being that it is an alien skull. And that compared to a human skull, you found out that very possibly there might be some ability of mental telepathy or a different sort of a speech or lack of speech pattern, which I thought was very intriguing.
Well, that's how it looks. I mean, this creature, whatever the Starchild was, had a skull the size of a small human adult, about a 5 foot tall person, smaller than your skull or my skull or an average skull, which is about, on average, we have about 1,400 cubic centimeters of brain in our heads, if we're average. The size of the human found with the Starchild was about 5 feet tall. It's a small human adult, not uncommon at all in Mexico today. And that's a 1,200 cubic centimeter brain. The Starchild is that same volume of size. It is the size of that one. It's a little bit smaller than an average human skull right now. But the brain that's in that head is 1,600 cubic centimeters of volume. If you pour flaxseed in and pour it out and measure it, that is what you get, 1,600 cubic centimeters. So it's 400 more than it should be. That's fully 1/3 more brain than it should have for a human that size. And then on top of that, it has an incredibly small mouth and lower face. The roof of its mouth is flat, as if it has no tongue. Now, I don't talk about all these details in the video because there's just not enough time, but these are all true things I'm telling you. So it has a very small mouth that has teeth, but a flat roof of a mouth, so it's like there's no tongue in there, or if there's a tongue, it's very small. The neck itself is about half the size of a normal human neck and an oval instead of round. So in every way, it is not designed like us to have necessarily our speech mechanism. And if it doesn't, then it's got this huge brain, it's got this thin neck, tiny little neck. Why not make the assumption that it communicates by telepathy? Because simply so many people that have encountered gray aliens always say they communicated by telepathy. They didn't talk, but I knew what they were saying. I could hear it in my head. Well, that seems to me, if you go with the assumption that the Starchild Skull is going to prove to be the skull of a gray alien, which I think is very, very likely now, then we have to look at the idea that part of what allows them to communicate by telepathy is the fact that they don't have a voice mechanism of the kind we do, and they have that massively supercharged brain in that head.
Well, we had another question that came in from Chris. He said, it's okay if science cannot yet explain it, but instead of outright rejecting this, why don't they propose steps to investigate it? Well, they didn't propose steps, but you certainly have.
Yeah, well, it's been 13 years, and not one of them ever, not one organization, not ever, has ever come to me. And it's been on television, it's been on television all that time, on and off, just about every year or 2 years at the most. There'll be another show that'll have it on TV. It isn't like nobody knows about it. We're not hiding it under a bushel. They don't want to deal with it because just think about it for a minute. It changes so much of one of their fundamental paradigms, which is that alien life does not exist. To have to accept that and to have to accommodate that and to have to wrap their whole understanding of human reality around that new reality is going to be a massive change that nobody who's sitting in the power seats of mainstream science wants to undergo on their watch. If they retire and go home and tend the tomato garden or whatever, they won't care. But while they're sitting in the power chair, they don't want any big changes to occur because of the turmoil that it's going to bring. Well, with every major change that comes along in our lives, somebody's sitting in the power chair and somebody has to deal with it. And so with the Starchild, it'll be no different. They're going to fight it as long as they can, ignore it as long as they can, ridicule it as long as they can. These are all the tactics that they use to try to stave these things off. But eventually the day comes when they can't do anything but accept it for what it is, recognize the truth, and go about the process of doing that reorganization that they just don't want to do. So the day will come but they are not going to help us. We're going to have to cram it down their throats. This is the way major change always occurs in human society. It gets crammed down the unwilling throats of those who want to maintain the status quo the way it is because they're comfortable with it, they're happy with it, and they don't want to endure what goes with a major change.
Well, I don't think it's just the people in power, but I think your average person isn't always willing to accept a major change in their outlook either. And which brings me to my next question. When they found this skull next to the woman's skull, had you ever had any theories as to what their relationship might have been? Do you think she was trying to hide this creature?
Well, she was definitely trying to hide it because it was, according to the girl, it was in a mine tunnel way away from anything in the middle of nowhere. And she just happened to stumble across it out doing some surveying away from the village where she was staying. So it looks as if we first thought that it was a mother and child. That was all that made sense to us. Who the scene was such that we know for sure she buried whoever she was. She buried the dead Starchild Skull in a shallow grave in the bottom of a mine tunnel. Then she laid down beside it. She left out of the shallow grave. She left one of its hands sticking out.
Huh.
She laid down beside it. She took that hand and she wrapped it around her upper arm bone, and then she committed suicide.
Wow.
So she had enough of an emotional attachment here to bring the body there, hide it, bury it, and commit suicide. We don't know how. We don't know how she killed herself, but she obviously did because the girl found two skeletons, one lying on the surface, the human one lying on the surface, the other one under the light coating of dirt, the floor of the mine tunnel, and that was the Starchild. So we initially thought that's mother and child. Later, genetically, it was proven that they were not related. And then later, even though that test showed that they were not related as mother and child, now we know that they're not related as the Starchilds. We also thought for a long time that it was a hybrid between with a human mother and a non-human father, but the new DNA has shown that test was wrong as well. So, and the problem with the early testing is that when you're dealing with something with DNA that is so radically different, like the Starchilds, what was available then were primers, and primers just didn't work well on the Starchild. Now that we're able to pick genomes apart base pair by base pair, it's like taking every brick out of a building and knowing what that brick is and where it goes and how it fits in relation to all the other bricks. Now that we can do that, it doesn't matter that the Starchild has huge chunks of non-human, maybe non-earthly DNA, but nonetheless, it gives us enough to go on to know that we've got something really, really spectacular here, and it's going to change all the things that we were talking about earlier in terms of the gene code of not just on Earth, but what's out there and perhaps certainly the rest of the galaxy and maybe the rest of the universe. The Starchild is going to cause ripple effects across major aspects of science.
Okay, Lloyd, we're going to have to just take a quick break now. I'm sorry, but yes, it will indeed cause major changes. I can understand that. Lloyd's here talking about the Starchild Skull. You can address your questions now, posting them on our website, AtlanticCoastUFOs.com. After the show, go to LloydPye.com for a lot more information, or go directly to his website, thestarchildproject.com. We'll be right back after a short break. Hi, welcome back to the Kate Valentine UFO Show on 1160 WVNJ. Our guest today is Mr. Lloyd Pye, that's P-Y-E, and he's discussing the Starchild Skull Project, or the Starchild Project. If you have questions, post them now at AtlanticCoastUFOs.com, or after the show for much more information, please go to Lloyd's website, LLOYDPYE.com, or starchildproject.com. You'll get a wealth of information, and you can donate to this very worthy cause. Lloyd, over the break we had a very nice comment that came in from Judd. He said that, sorry if we've already said this, he just tuned in, but where is the skull now? It should be in a museum.
You'd think it would be, and someday it will be. Someday it'll be, in a museum somewhere that it'll be like the Mona Lisa or something like that, or King Tut's mask or whatever, whatever. But for right now, it just stays in a bank vault for the most part.
Is that? Oh, very good. You have to watch that because some people might be after it.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So
we're aware of that, and we too take as good a care of it as we can.
Right. And honestly, we had another question that came in from Bill. He was wondering if there was any relationship between this and the what they call the crystal skulls.
No, not at all.
Okay.
The crystal skulls are just crystal. They're rock. They're carved. The Starchild is a real, as I said earlier, a real true bone skull. No one that's ever seen it thinks it's anything other than the skull of a real living being that was alive at one time 900 years ago. And maybe it's important to mention that both skulls have been, the human and the Starchild, have been carbon 14'd and dated to 900 years ago, plus or minus 40 years. So that's an accurate description of when they died, and that they did die together indeed, as the girl told us, the woman told the story of how she found them when she was a girl.
Now, a question that occurred to me while we were speaking was that I was wondering if, I know you feel deeply that this will be an important historical event I'm not going to say if, I'm going to say when you prove it to be alien. But had you done any historical research on the time period, like 900 years ago, when these two creatures were alive? Yeah,
I think it was just about the time of the beginning of the rise of the Aztecs, actually. Mm-hmm. I think what we're talking about is 1100, now 1200 AD, if you consider it, 2100. So about 1200 AD. There you go. But somewhere in that range, the rise of the Aztecs.
So that, again, with your intervention theory, it might almost seem that there was an alien visitor that came down at that time and started things going.
Well, I think alien visitors have been coming forever. I think, again, that it's all, that we're terraformed. And again, my ebook, Intervention Theory Essentials, which I do recommend, not just to sell a book, but the reactions of people who read it say, oh my gosh, I never thought of any of it, never heard any of this. Where does this information been hiding, and all of that? So if you make the assumption that they've been coming all along, and I believe they have, then whichever ones, there are the terraformers, and then there are ones that just sort of visit on like a kind of a routine, casual basis. And I think grays are part of that. And I think it's been going on all the way back. There's good evidence it goes back for hundreds of years, and paintings on walls and scratches on cave walls and rock art for the Aborigines, and on and on and on. So I don't see that there's anything particularly unusual about one being here 900 years ago. And there are also crashes. We have stories of crashes. There's Roswell. There's the Aztec crash. There's a number of crashes. So they crash. They have problems when they get here. So maybe, I think Starchild just probably was one of those victims of one of those mishaps with their craft, and ended up being stranded here for some period of time, don't know how long, and ended up dying here and being buried here, and by some miracle that girl finds it, and here we are all this time later with the ability to really change human history in a very profound way because of this one really miraculous skull.
So if the government really had recovered bodies from Roswell, and if those creatures passed and died, and if you could get your hands on one of those skulls, that would be very interesting for you.
Well, it would. It absolutely would. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. I mean, just because of the Starchild, let's just say, for example, do the thought experiment.
Okay.
We absolutely can prove, we have the money, some wealthy individual contacts me and says, okay, I've heard about your thing, I believe you're probably telling the truth, we'll check it out, but if you're telling the truth, we'll go to the lab, we'll check you out, but if it's true, we'll put up the money. We go through all that, we get the money, we do what we need to do, and we prove it. Okay, all we've really proven is that one alien was alive on Earth and died 900 years ago. It doesn't prove that it's an ongoing thing. And so what this does is it gives the people out there who want to live in the future, who want to look ahead, it gives them the stepping stone they need to take that next step into the future and begin to work that way. But by the same token, all of the people out there who prefer to live in the past, who don't like change, who don't want to move ahead, those ones who say, well, everything was so much better when I was a kid, and those kinds of people also are served by the Starchild because it allows them to say, well, okay, you had it once 900 years ago. That doesn't mean it's now. It serves both major groups that are out there, those that want to move ahead and those that want to live in the past. And it isn't the equivalent of UFOs landing on the White House lawn or hovering over a football stadium someday or something like that. That just shoves it in everybody's face in a way that's unavoidable and could be frightening. But the Starchild is an interim step to the future. For those who want to take it, it gives them all the encouragement and the proof and the soundness of the reality of that as they need. Whereas those who are not ready to take that step can still hang back in the bushes and let the leaders move us ahead, and that's how it'll happen.
Well, what is your time frame on this? How long do you think that might take?
Well, if we get the money, now it's your guess is as good as mine as to when we're going to get these videos in front of the right kind of person. Mm-hmm. Hopefully soon, if everybody will help spread them out and share them with anybody they know that has real means, then it could, we could have it in a matter of weeks or a couple months or whatever. But from that point, from the time we have the money in hand to pay the lab to do the work, and we also have to film at the same time, this is not something you can do and not film every bit of it. So it's, expensive. And also, by the way, let me say that for all of you who hear that it only costs a few $1,000s to recover a genome, yes, and we go over that in the video. That's a living DNA. Very, very easy to recover that. The example that I use is it's like long strings of Christmas lights in perfect condition. Now, with the Starchild or anything that's been dead for a long time, anything over 50 years dead, the DNA breaks down into very, very, very small pieces, and they're contaminated and all that. So it's like taking those Christmas lights and putting them through a wood chipper. That's what has to be done. So those little pieces have to be recovered, distinguished, and put back together. That's what costs. So you're talking 7 figures there. Low 7 figures, but 7 figures. You're talking about a lot of money. So when we can get that first part of just identifying all the pieces takes 3 to 4 months. And then you have another 12 to 18 months to assemble those little pieces. It becomes like an incredibly hard jigsaw puzzle.
Well, I tell you
assemble those pieces into a picture that makes sense, but then you have it, and then there it is. It's all over. Here's the proof. Can't deny it. There you go.
Okay. Well, Lloyd, we have to get your website out there in case anyone's listening and wants to donate. So please fire away. Okay,
it's starchildproject.com, starchildproject.com, or www.lloydpye.com if you're interested in some of the other things that I do. And that would be the Intervention Theory Essentials, lloydpye.com. And starchildproject.com, there is a Starchild ebook, Starchild Skull Essentials ebook that'll give you all the basics of that. These are good ebooks. They're very heavily illustrated and simple and easy to read and get through, and they'll leave you with a whole new look at the world around you.
I can only encourage people to go ahead and get them because they're fascinating. Thanks again, Lloyd. And you're welcome. Thanks as always to both Bill and Dave. Always good to know they're there. Thanks, of course, to our sponsors who support us. Please support them. Thanks for listening. All your comments, they add so much to the show. You can hear us again Sunday at 4, or better yet, you can help us keep our numbers up by subscribing to our still free podcast. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next Friday at 1. Happy Father's Day to humans and aliens alike. Kate Valentine here, reminding you to keep your eye on that sky. Bye.